The overhaul and repair department was the largest activity operating at the base with 3,077 employees in 1962. On April 1, 1967, the overhaul and repair department was redesignated the Naval Air Rework Facility, or NARF, and became a separate command under the commander, Naval Air Systems Command. Later in September, NARF started processing the first A-7A Corsair II. A 16-year era ended December 7, 1967, with the last test flight of the 2,123rd helicopter to be overhauled at NARF. NARF completed its last A-4 Skyhawk rework in August 1973. Artisans started repairs in April 1975 on the new TF-34 jet engine, used to power the S-3A Viking, the Navy's newest anti-submarine aircraft. NARF also inducted its first P-3C Orion for rework. By 1975, NARF employed 2,800 civilians and had an annual payroll of $45 million. One of the most advanced jet engine test facilities in the Navy opened at NARF in 1978. And now, Part 3.
I'd like to wish all the dedicated military, civilian, and contract support assigned to Fleet Readiness Center Southeast a happy 75th anniversary. I continue to be impressed with how dedicated you are to the mission of providing high-quality maintenance solutions to the fleet. The FRC Southeast team remains steady in the wake of challenges with aging aircraft, budget constraints, and emerging technologies, yet you always find innovative ways to continue to support our warfighters. As commander of the Fleet Readiness Centers and a former commanding officer of FRC Southeast, I am extremely proud of what you do every single day. You are making major strides with implementing critical chain project management across production lines, and you do it safely while being good stewards of the environment. We have a responsibility to our warfighters and our nation to continue developing and implementing long-range strategies that allow our Commander-in-Chief to use our naval aviation where it matters, when it matters. Your skill and commitment to step up to the challenge is extraordinary, and I am fully confident you will continue to make history during the next 75 years. Happy 75th anniversary, FRC Southeast, and thanks for all your efforts in keeping our fighting forces mission ready.
When the 1970s ended, the Cold War showed no signs of warming. This prolonged period of subdued hostility gripped most of the world between the 1940s and the early 1990s. America and Great Britain feared that the Soviet Union would spread communism worldwide. President Ronald Reagan campaigned during the 1980 election on a strong anti-communist platform. During his first years in office, he brought about the largest peacetime military buildup in the nation's history on a theory of peace through strength. He instituted the policy of supporting movements that opposed such communist regimes as the Soviet-backed government of Afghanistan. The F-4 continued to form a major part of U.S. military air power throughout the 1970s and 1980s, being gradually replaced by more modern aircraft such as the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, a supersonic twin-engine fighter, and the F/A-18 Hornet, an all-weather fighter and attack aircraft. The single-seat Model A Hornet was the nation's first strike fighter at a cost of about $29 million each. Cecil Field was gearing up for the arrival of the first Hornet in April 1983. The aircraft was designed for traditional strike applications, such as interdiction and close air support, without compromising its fighter capabilities. The Hornet increased strike mission survivability and supplemented the F-14 Tomcat in fleet air defense. The wage-grade employees of Naval Air Rework Facility, or NARF for short, voted in December 1984 to bring in the International Brotherhood of Teamsters to represent them. Today, the Teamsters Local 512 continues to represent these skilled workers along with others such as the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 1943, the National Association of Government Inspectors, and the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Local 22. The first of many Hornets destined for rework at NARF arrived on April 24, 1985 for corrosion control work involving electromagnetic interference shields. On July 3, 1985, NARF dedicated two facilities, a $13.5 million structure designed for cleaning and plating aircraft parts and components, and an aircraft acoustical enclosure known as the Hush House. During part of the ceremony, an A-7 Corsair had been running in the facility just a few yards from where the ceremony was being held. When a switch was thrown, the hangar doors began to open and the escaping sound of the aircraft could clearly be heard, dramatically demonstrating how the new facility reduced engine noise levels to acceptable community noise standards. The Materials Engineering Laboratory, a 16,500 square foot, $2 million addition to NARF, was dedicated on April 13, 1987. This new lab was uniquely designed for scientific and technical investigations and evaluation of aircraft, engines, components, and systems. The building would house about 25 engineers, metallurgists, chemists, and other specialists. In April 1987, NARF underwent its fourth name change. It was now called the Naval Aviation Depot, or NADEP for short. By this time, the depot was reworking on average 42 A-7 Corsair light attack aircraft and 52 P-3C Orion aircraft per year, in addition to 429 engines and 56,000 components. On May 2, 1987, the Blue Angels performed their first air show in the new FA-18 Hornet at Cecil Field. NADEP began modification to the T-2 Buckeyes on December 23, 1987. By 1988, the heavily used runways on NAS jacks were slated for new surfaces. The main runway reopened on February 22, 1989 at a cost of $11.3 million. Air traffic was diverted to NAS Cecil Field during the repair process. The Soviet Union began to crumble in 1989 with the toppling of the Berlin Wall. The wall marked the separation between the eastern sector of Berlin, controlled by the Soviet Union, and the western sectors occupied by the United States, France, and Great Britain. Diplomatic relationships between the major players were reestablished in the 1990s to the relief of many people around the world who had been impacted by the Cold War. As the decade ended, the future of NAS jacks looked bleak. Just as the 1940s were defined as a period of unprecedented growth, the 1990s came to symbolize cuts. There was even talk of base closure and realignment, or BRAC. The BRAC Commission recommended the closing of NAS Cecil Field, which also had a major impact on NAS jacks. NADEP spent considerable time during the 1990s defending itself against closure, as did the Master Air Base. 1990 became a pivotal time in defense history when Iraq invaded Kuwait on August 2, 1990. In response, 350 workers at NADEP were asked to speed up repairs on aircraft. NADEP Commander Captain David Wynn prioritized the rework of 3 F-18 Hornets, 4 A-7 Corsairs, and jet engines. On September 24th, NADEP inducted the last A-7 Corsair for planned maintenance. At that time, the platform held the record as the longest running rework for any aircraft type at the depot. The Navy was phasing out the A-7 in favor of the F-18 Hornet. The command dedicated a $12 million gas turbine engine repair facility on October 15, 1990. It was named for Commander Andrew Crinkley, the first commander of the Assembly and Repair Department, the original name of the maintenance facility in 1940. The 160,000 square foot building combined a number of engine production and support shops under one roof. This completed the consolidation of the depot's entire engine program into one geographical area, including the cleaning and plating facility. Much of the equipment installed there was designed to handle the modern composite materials used in fighter aircraft and the more conventional materials used in the A-7 Corsair II and the P-3C Orion. The building housed a vertical stacker, which was a state-of-the-art computerized part storage and retrieval system. In 1990, artisans were repairing and reworking the J-52 engine that powered the A-4 Skyhawk and the A-6 Intruder, the TF-41 installed in the A-7 Corsair, the TF-34 in the S-3 Viking, and the F-404, the power plant for the Hornet. The U.S. attack on Iraq, called Operation Desert Storm, began on January 17, 1991, with massive air and missile attacks on targets in Iraq and Kuwait. Naval Aviator Lieutenant Commander Michael Scott Spiker from NAS Cecil Field was shot down over the Iraqi desert while flying a Hornet, making him the first U.S. casualty of the war. Captain William Albertoli took command of NADEP on March 6, 1991. His astute business sense and inspired leadership were instrumental in saving the depot from the BRAC Commission's chopping block. He cut costs that enabled the facility to turn a profit. Although NADEP was spared in the second round of base closures, Captain Albertoli announced he would cut 700 of the 3,300 jobs.
We ended up going through a RIF, which was a very devastating time, and we all had to leave at the middle of the day, had to go to certain exit points, and you received a thin package or a thick package. Thick package was bad, and it was a hard time. It ended up reducing our cost and ended up keeping us open in the long run. So in the long run it was good, but in the short term it was a bad time.
On August 15, 1991, NADEP celebrated its 50th anniversary with the return of its first completed aircraft, the Yellow Peril, an N2S Stearman. The event featured the privately owned Stearman flying into the station and displayed in the same hangar where the first overhauled aircraft was housed in 50 years ago. June 1993 saw the next round of BRAC discussions. NADEP employees made a bus trip to a hearing in Atlanta to voice their concerns and present facts. On June 26th, the BRAC Commission removed NADEP Jacksonville from the list for closure consideration, along with NADEP North Island and NADEP Cherry Point. However, the three remaining depots located in Norfolk, Pensacola, and Alameda were destined for closure. NAS Cecil Field was set to close as well. In January 1994, NADEP waited to hear if it would be the new rework site for the Grumman F-14 Tomcat. The military depot in Norfolk originally handled the workload. NADEP Jacksonville's workload and workforce grew substantially with the transfer of employees from the closing depots.
Just imagine, the F-14 probably is the most complex aircraft that the Navy's ever operated. None had as many moving parts and was higher performance as the F-14. So you can imagine wholesale picking up that program from NADEP Norfolk, but moving that program to Jacksonville. The biggest learning curve was understanding what the frailties were of specifically the F-14. The weaknesses, the structural issues, inlet walls, cowl flaps, stabs, all those kinds of things. And to be able to recruit enough talent from NADEP Norfolk to come down in the short term and not miss a beat in terms of processing and delivery was a little bit of a challenge.
The first Tomcats arrived at NADEP on January 6, 1994, but not for rework. Artisans would eventually use the aircraft's parts for the repair program. It wasn't until October 3rd that NADEP inducted the first F-14, along with the first EA-6B Prowler. Navy officials announced that the redefined role of the S-3 Viking carrier-based jet aircraft flown by squadrons at NAS Cecil Field would keep the S-3 squadrons in Jacksonville. Derived from the S-3A and formally configured for anti-submarine warfare, the S-3B of the 1990s was a premier surveillance and precision targeting platform for the Navy. Because of the engine's low-pitched sound, it was nicknamed the Hoover after the vacuum cleaner brand. In May 1995, another round of BRAC began, and NADEP employees once again feared the depot would be closed. While it had escaped the previous rounds, the facility was once again placed on the closure list.
My first day at work, that Monday, the 11th of May, we dispatched Tom Aton to Washington so that he could be in the audience when they had the BRAC ad hearing. And at about 9 o'clock that night, I was at home, and Tom Aton called me from Washington and said, "Skipper, we got bad news. We are on the list." The next morning, I came in, and I had the executive board and the XO and all the officers were in my office, and I got a phone call from the administrative assistant of the current congresswoman in our area, Congresswoman Tilly Fowler. And she says, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Well, I really don't need to. I've already heard Tom call me, and I know we're on the list." She says, "You're not on the list." Long story short, Tilly Fowler, with her own personal connections, in the dark of night, midnight and after that night, got to the chairman of the commission, and somehow mysteriously, between being put on the list on Monday afternoon and the formal announcement of the list on Tuesday morning, we were removed from the list.
On June 27, 1995, NADEP rolled out their first Royal Thai A7 Corsair to receive standard depot level maintenance rework at the facility. It was the first of 18 aircraft purchased by the government of Thailand under a foreign military sales contract. The first F-14 was tested in the new modified Hush House on March 14, 1996. However, running the engines in full, Stage 5 afterburner caused fire damage to the new building.
So we had to make a decision how we're going to do this work and how we're going to get it done efficiently. Well, in the heat of the night, we decided we would take F-14s, truck them up I-17, make a left turn onto 103rd Street, and take them down to the gate at Cecil Field. So we actually did it, but when the first F-14 arrived early in the morning, we found out it didn't fit through the front gate. So in order to get it through the gate, we did the same thing that you probably do in all your homes and how you get a sofa through the door. You anchor it on one side and you pick up the other side and you kind of wedge it through. We actually had to inflate the port strut, deflate the starboard strut, and wedge it through the gate to get it through. So that morning at my desk, I signed an actual voucher to expand the gate at Cecil Field, and we've never had any problems after that.
At the end of 1996, NADEP rolled out the last T-2C Buckeye trainer to complete the workload. The Buckeyes were used by the Naval Air Training Command to conduct basic jet flight training for future Navy and Marine Corps aviators. The aircraft established an outstanding record of safety and reliability while providing training for more than 11,000 students to pilot 18 different models of Navy jet aircraft. On July 11, 1997, NADEP artisans loaded A7 Corsairs on a barge for future disposal at sea. The depot was finally getting out of the Corsair business for good. The remaining older aircraft would be used as an artificial reef. The S3 community and Sea Control Wing Atlantic were officially welcomed to their home at Hangar 1000 on October 28, 1997. Their arrival meant 6 S3 squadrons flying 50 additional aircraft would now be operating on NAS Jacksonville. Jet trainers arrived at NAS Jacksonville on August 14, 1998. The squadron of TA-4J and T-45 jets came from Corpus Christi, Texas. Student pilots were here to conduct their first carrier landings, a requirement to earning their pilot's wings. On February 22, 1999, NADEP inducted the first SH-60 helicopter to commence helo rework. This was the first helicopter seen in the facility in 33 years. As directed by Congress, NAS Cecil Field was decommissioned on September 30, 1999 due to a 1993 BRAC decision. It opened in 1941, shortly before the United States entered into World War II. The naval installation consisted of 4 separate facilities: the NAS Cecil Field Complex, Outlying Field White House, the Yellow Water Weapons Department, and the Pine Castle Electronic Warfare Range. By late 1999, approximately 17,200 acres were transferred to the civilian sector, later renamed the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, while the remainder was transferred to Naval Air Station Jacksonville. December 1999 saw the last SH-3 Sea King helicopters depart from the station. Reserve Squadron HS-75 was receiving the new SH-60 helicopters and phasing out the old birds. After a decade of cuts, dedicated leadership, and reorganization, NADEP ended the millennium bigger and better than ever. Its future looked even brighter.
Hi, this is Tiger Jones from Jacksonville Sharks, and I want to wish a happy 75th anniversary to the Fleet Readiness Center Southeast.
Hi, I'm Congressman Andrew Crenshaw, and I'd like to offer my heartfelt thanks to the men and women of Fleet Readiness Center Southeast. This year, you're celebrating 75 years of top-notch service to the fleet, and I commend you on your dedication and commitment to our warfighters. As the largest industrial facility in Northeast Florida, I'm honored to represent you, and I congratulate you on 75 years of service to our local community and to our nation.